A leaked report by Swedish police says the number of so-called vulnerable zones in the country has jumped to 23. The areas, often described in Swedish media as no-go zones, have sprung up across the country, particularly in the largest cities. The report adds that a parallel social structure has emerged in those areas, with police facing difficulty carrying out their duties there. The leak partly blames Islamic extremism for the problem. Some service providers have even refused to enter certain areas. In April, mail provider PostNord wouldn't enter Stockholm's Rinkeby suburb, citing security concerns. Rinkeby made headlines last year when police opened fire after a mob of around 30 people began attacking officers with rocks. In fact, the National Police Commissioner says the number of no-go zones is even higher than stated in the leaked report, and he also called for a change of approach.
Well, we see developments in our country which are not going in the right direction always. We have a bit more than 60 vulnerable areas around the major cities of Sweden.
Meanwhile, the mayor of Belgium's second largest city, Antwerp, says almost 560 potentially radicalised people are under the authorities' control. Of those, 189 are thought to pose a real danger. That is over in Austria. The country's foreign minister said Muslim kindergartens should be closed.
Kindergartens should prepare children for school so that they can speak German. But so-called Muslim kindergartens are different in terms of their ethnic and language principles. We don't need them.
Sebastian Kurz has caused controversy in the past. Back in 2015, he proposed what was called the Islam law that he put forward before the Austrian parliament. This proposed that all mosques got their funding only from within Austria, and also that there was an Austrian-approved version of the Quran that was used in mosques within Austria. Now, a watered-down version of that law was passed. It didn't have the official verified Quran in it. But in October of this year, from the 1st of October, it will be illegal in Austria to wear a burqa. That ban was signed into law just last week. And the Austrian Chancellor, Christian Kern, his grand coalition government has just fallen apart. They're going to the polls in Austria in October of this year in snap elections or earlier elections. And the far-right Freedom Party, who've supported a lot of the anti-Islam legislation, well, they're polling currently around 30% in the polls there. They've seen a big boost in support.
According to a government spokesman on Thursday, France has instructed local officials to show more humanity toward migrants after a human rights watchdog said it bore responsibility for the inhuman conditions migrants face in the Calais region. About 400 migrants from the Middle East and Africa have returned to the northern French port city, which the last government sent in bulldozers to tear down the migrant camp known as the Jungle in November of last year. Government spokesman Christophe Castaner told reporters prefects have given instructions for more flexibility to be shown, in particular for more humanity to be shown. We cannot treat women and men as if they are just numbers. Castaner said that reforming France's asylum process was a top priority for newly elected President Emmanuel Macron.
Turning to Russia now, President Vladimir Putin has laid a wreath at a tomb of the unknown soldiers in Moscow in commemoration of those who lost their lives in the Second World War. He was accompanied by Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev, government officials and religious leaders. June the 22nd is known as the Day of Remembrance and Sorrow in Russia, marking the beginning of the Nazi Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union back in 1941. Many events, including commemoration marches and concerts, are held across the nation on the day.
He fought for our country, but now a Navy veteran and his wife have been told to take down one of their flagpoles displaying an American flag or face a fine.
That's right. The city says the couple broke the code, but the couple says they're being punished for being very patriotic.
All right, joining us right now via Skype is U.S. Navy veteran Ron Rayetta and his wife Sherry. Ron, what was your fundamental thought when you received word that your flag is a problem?
Well, actually curious. I can't believe that somebody even turned me in on the code. And the two flags I had put up were professionally done. They're fine and beautiful. Everybody enjoyed them. But one person that has nothing to do, I guess, filed a code violation. So we went in front of the city council, and they try to help us, but they say if it's in the code, you got to take it down. So they made me take the code down on D-Day, if you believe that.
Oh, my goodness. That's crazy.
Yeah, that was unbelievable. And then to top it off, they charged me $104 for a permit to put the flagpole in the ground.
A Christian elementary school in Canada is being told it can't teach students scriptures that may be considered offensive. The board for the Alberta school has also made administrators take a Bible verse off their website and from a wall inside the school. The orders go against an agreement that allows Cornerstone Christian Academy to teach its basic tenets. The school receives state funding, and they say their freedom of religion and expression are being violated.
The Church of England has admitted that it helped to hide the long-term sexual abuse of young men by one of its former bishops. Archbishop of Canterbury Justin Welby apologized Thursday to the victims of ex-bishop Peter Ball after his church published a report that detailed how senior leaders covered up allegations against Ball over many years. Ball was convicted and imprisoned in 2015 for misconduct in public office and indecent assaults against teenagers from the 1970s to the 1990s. Ball admitted to abusing 18 young men, and he was released from prison after 16 months. One of Ball's victims, Neil Todd, later took his own life. The church's report said, "The church, at its most senior levels and over many years, supported him unwisely and displayed little care for his victims."
In an effort to stay cool, a group of British students have defied their school dress code as well as gender norms by wearing skirts to protest a rule against shorts.
My son personally is coming home very, very hot kind of thing. So, and he's struggling at school, and I think he's quite irritable and stuff like that. So I think in terms of they should be able to wear shorts if they want to. I don't see why that should be a problem. So I think
most
in terms
of the
them wearing
Exeter Academy
skirts,
seem to be on board.
I think it's great.
We're allowed to wear skirts all year round, and then they get cold legs and we have to sit there sweating.
I think it's good. If they can't wear shorts, then they have to wear skirts. I don't think it's like them being told off for having hairy legs though.
With Wednesday marking the hottest June day for decades in Britain, these boys aren't skirting the issue.
Beachgoers may have been surprised to see thousands of jellyfish on one of the world's most beautiful beaches this past weekend. Local man Justin Silvestre Albo posted pictures to Facebook of the bloom on June 16th. The pictures appear to show thousands of jellyfish covering Nacpan Beach in El Nido, Philippines. According to local reports, the municipal government may temporarily close the beach. Ocean currents and climate change may contribute to the sizes of big blooms like this one. This year, Condé Nast Traveler ranked El Nido 4th on its list of the 20 most beautiful beaches in the world. According to the list, quote, El Nido is home to around 50 white sand beaches, which are set around dramatic limestone formations and boast the finest and whitest sand you'll ever see.
About 300,000 cases of tick-borne Lyme disease are diagnosed in the United States each year. And with an expanding tick population, experts think this year could be worse than usual. Thanks to a milder winter and more host animals, there could be more cases of Lyme and deadly tick-borne infections. Powassan virus, for example, causes swelling in the brain that can lead to permanent neurological damage. It's fatal in about 10% of cases. Some ticks even carry a disease that can give you a meat allergy. Researchers warn it's getting more common, but they're still learning about how and why the disease spreads. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention isn't tracking it closely yet. Luckily, those diseases are still relatively rare, especially compared with Lyme. For example, in the decade since 2006, the CDC recorded fewer than 7 cases of Powassan virus on average every year. The CDC recommends people avoid tick-borne diseases by using insect repellent, staying out of brush and tall grass, and taking showers after visits to tick country. If you're bitten, tell your doctor about any fever or rash.
Cindy lost tropical storm status today, but it's still plenty dangerous. The storm rumbled across the deep south, bringing heavy rain, strong winds, and at least one tornado.
In Fairfield, Alabama, the siren sounded as the tornado, which was captured on a cell phone, touched down just miles from downtown Birmingham. The twister ripped apart several buildings. Powerful winds tossed this truck right through a chain-link fence. Emergency crews report several people were injured, but no one was killed. The tornado was likely spawned from the remnants of Tropical Storm Cindy. That storm system has dumped several inches of rain from Louisiana to the Florida Panhandle. In southwest Louisiana, creeks and bayous flooded many low-lying neighborhoods. Some areas on the Gulf Coast got up to 10 inches of rain, forcing drivers to abandon their cars.
I was going to drive through it, but it was a little too deep to go in there with the car.
Mississippians along the coast performed a well-rehearsed routine.
Y'all good? Y'all need anything?
Neighbors checking on neighbors. Larry Jones took us by boat down what is his driveway to show us the area that's flooded dozens of times in the 49 years he's lived here.
It's life on the river.
Yes, sir. Wouldn't trade it for nothing, though.
Anthony, the Biloxi River has risen 13 feet because of Tropical Storm Cindy. The water has overtopped the banks of the river and has flooded areas that are at least a quarter mile from the Biloxi River. The good news is the river's cresting, and the water will only go down from here.
In just 8 days, Guatemala has suffered another major earthquake. The latest one happened this morning, a 6.8 in magnitude off the Pacific coast near Port of San Jose. Buildings were reported to be shaking, trees were downed, and this caused powerful tremors in El Salvador. There's some of the latest pictures coming out this morning. That's Antigua, Guatemala, where you can see some of the damage there. Now, as I mentioned, there are no reports of casualties, but this is the second major earthquake in just 8 days. The last one was also off the coast of Guatemala. It was near San Pablo, Guatemala. It happened on June 14th, and this particular earthquake was deadly.
Counterfeit ISIS-themed Lego sets have been discovered for sale in Malaysia. The sets originated from China under the name Falcon Commando and were first discovered at a Taiping store on May 24th, according to Malaysian news site Berita Yahoo 7 News reports the toys were available on 3 websites, including one that ships to Australia. 8 toy sets pit counter-terror police figurines against ISIS figurines. According to 9 News, one of the ISIS mini-sets pictures an ISIS figurine armed with a chainsaw and a bloodied head at his feet. After the discovery of the sets, Lego has distanced itself from the counterfeit toys. A spokesperson told the International Business Times UK, quote, "The product is not a Lego product, nor are the bricks in the set Lego bricks. As a company dedicated to inspire and develop children, we would naturally never make a product like this."
While assisting Iraqi forces in the push to retake Mosul, Canadian Special Operations Command say a Canadian Special Operations sniper successfully hit an ISIS fighter from a record-breaking distance of more than 2 miles away. The unnamed marksman was part of Canada's elite Joint Task Force 2 Special Operations Unit. It is currently deployed in an, quote, advise and assist capacity to help Iraqi security forces battle ISIS from behind the front line in Mosul. The unit said in a written statement, quote, "The Canadian Special Operations Command can confirm that a member of the Joint Task Force 2 successfully hit a target from 3,540 meters.
Australia's Defence Ministry says it would resume airstrikes in Syria 2 days after it suspended them following Russia's threats against the US-led coalition. Canberra's decision follows the downing of a Syrian jet by the US-led coalition in the south of that country. In reaction, Russia warned the coalition not to fly over an area in the west of the Euphrates River where the Syrian army and its allies are present. Moscow also cut a hotline it shares with the coalition to prevent any collision in the skies. The US has said that it is working on de-escalation with Russia, adding that Australia stopped its airstrikes due to a range of potential risks. It is not clear when Australian jets would fly over Syria again.
The chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Russian Parliament is in Israel, and Konstantin Kosachev is unsurprisingly defending Russian actions in Syria. Kosachev wants to see closer cooperation with Israel when it comes to Syria, especially when it involves information sharing. In an interview with the Jerusalem Post today, he's also expressing hopes that Israel can convince Syrian opposition groups to put down their weapons and join negotiations. Kosachev says he's speaking as a politician and not an intelligence agent, and that Russian intervention in Syria benefits the whole region, including Israel. He's warning that if there's a violent regime change in Syria, those who take over could end up being, quote, someone like Islamic State leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, which will have a negative influence on all of Syria's neighbors. But when it comes to Israeli interests in the region, Kosachev is evasive. He says that Russia won't interfere in bilateral relations between Iran and Syria, and that Iran has a right to place its troops on the Syrian-Israeli border if Syria allows it. The U.S. envoy for combating ISIS, Brett McGurk, is saying that neither ISIS nor Iranian proxies will be allowed to remain on the Golan Heights. The 31-year-old Mohammed bin Salman has been serving as a defense and oil minister for a while now, and he's been known for his hawkish anti-Iran foreign policy. In Yemen, he's been the leader behind Saudi efforts to defeat or at least check the Iran-backed Houthi forces. According to Joshua Teitelbaum at the Begin Sadat Institute for Strategic Studies, Israel has a large stake in the Yemen operation because it cannot afford to have an Iranian force control access to the Red Sea and the Gulf of Eilat. Teitelbaum expects bin Salman to continue the Saudi policy of limited clandestine cooperation with Israel. Bin Salman is framing the Saudi conflict with Iran as religious, saying that the apocalyptic beliefs of Twelver Shiites, the dominant religion in Iran, pushes Iran towards irrational actions. Twelver Shiites believe that the hidden Imam, a messianic figure, will reveal himself to the world at a time of great conflict.
Joel, this is a fascinating read. Why the 12th Imam and why now?
Because it affects Iranian foreign policy right now. In other words, the leaders of Iran believe this is happening. They believe that this Islamic Messiah is coming, this 12th Imam, at the end of days, in the end of time, and that once he comes, either Israel and the United States, Judeo-Christian society as we've known it, will have already been destroyed, or that all the conditions for their destruction will be there, and then the Messiah will come and finish off the infidels and set up an Islamic one-world government.
Iran is preparing to publish evidence that the U.S. is supporting Islamic State. That's according to a media advisor to Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard in an exclusive interview with RT.
There are plans to release documents revealing U.S. support for Daesh. However, they are not documents like formal contracts or written texts, but they cover activities in the field, including locations where they provided help to Daesh. They show evidence of arms, logistical and medical assistance, which are all clues to American support for Daesh.
You can add Missouri to the list of states suing the pharmaceutical industry over the deadly opioid epidemic.
The scale of the epidemic we face is startling.
Missouri's Attorney General Josh Hawley filed a scathing new lawsuit against 3 popular drug manufacturers, arguing they committed fraud by lying to doctors and consumers about how addictive and deadly their prescription drugs can be.
Every parent disabled by drug abuse is a tragedy. Every child lost to this epidemic is irreplaceable.
Missouri named Purdue, Janssen, and Endo Pharmaceuticals in the lawsuit, one of the largest in state history. It says the companies helped create the worst drug abuse epidemic Missouri has ever seen, contributing to roughly 500 opioid deaths in 2015 alone.
Well, Mexico is now the second deadliest country in the world after only Syria, Shannon. And while they're in a civil war, Mexico's violence is attributable to only one thing: drugs. So for context, it was a few years ago it seemed we were doing a story every week like this under then President Felipe Calderón. which replaced corrupt cops and took the cartels head-on with the military. But every time you take out one kingpin, another would emerge. Then Mexico got a new president in 2012, Enrique Peña Nieto, who took a less hardline view. Violence subsided, but now it is back. With the capture of former Sinaloa cartel leader El Chapo and others, the turf wars returned, fueled largely by the U.S. meth and heroin epidemic. Mexico saw a record 2,186 murders in May, 30% more than last year, and the most in 2 decades. So Mexico has 31 states. The highest rate of violence is in Guerrero, the country's opium capital. Today, Mexico provides 90% of our heroin, up from just 10% 20 years ago. Next is Sinaloa, the pot capital, where underlords are fighting to replace El Chapo. Finally, the biggest jump in killings, however, almost 400%, was in Baja, where the Jalisco cartel is fighting to control the drug routes into California and Arizona.
The U.S. Department of Defense spent millions of dollars over the past decade outfitting Afghan soldiers in uniforms that don't make a whole lot of sense. That's because the uniforms feature a forest camouflage pattern, a peculiar choice since there aren't many woodland areas in Afghanistan. In fact, it features a mostly dry climate. A report by the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction says the uniform may be inappropriate. The U.S. provides uniforms, equipment, and supplies to Afghanistan through the Afghanistan Security Forces Fund, which was created in 2005. The Watchdog report says the U.S. spent almost $94 million between November 2008 and January 2017 procuring the forest camouflage uniforms for the Afghan National Army. The U.S. government doesn't own the forest pattern, so it had to pay a licensing fee to an outside company to use it. The report determined the U.S. could have saved up to $28 million if it had chosen a non-proprietary pattern. The Afghan Ministry of Defense chose the forest pattern, but the report criticized the U.S. for not conducting any formal testing or evaluation to determine the pattern's effectiveness before purchasing the uniforms. Chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Senator Chuck Grassley, called the report embarrassing and said those who wasted money on the wrong camouflage uniforms seem to have lost sight of their common sense. In response to the report, the Pentagon is going to conduct a cost-benefit analysis to see if there's a more environmentally suitable and less costly option for the Afghan National Army uniforms.
No cuts to Medicaid! Save our liberty! 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 No cuts to Medicaid!
Authorities have found the highly flammable cladding used to construct a Grenfell Tower and even more buildings across the UK. The cladding, which is banned in buildings of a certain height in the UK, has been blamed for the rapid spread of flames at the Grenfell Tower apartment building. Now local authorities are conducting safety tests on about 600 buildings to see if they have the same material. So far, they have found the cladding in samples from at least 7 buildings. The exact cause of the deadly Grenfell Tower blaze is still unknown. The building reportedly had no central sprinkler system or fireproof doors, both of which could have contributed to the fire's rapid spread. The government has said people living in buildings where the combustible cladding is found should be rehoused until it's removed. Test results from other buildings are expected to be announced in the coming days.
Newly built apartments have been acquired by the British government for some of the residents who were displaced by the horrific Grenfell Tower fire last week. The 68 apartments are all newly built social housing in the Kensington and Chelsea borough. The local area has some of the most expensive housing in London.
Where you been? You've been your dad, have you?
A rescue dog named Teddy did some rescuing of his own when he helped his owner come out of a coma. Now he's being honored with a special award. Andy Zaz was in the hospital, suffering from pneumonia and placed in a medically induced coma. Andy's wife brought Teddy to the hospital to help with her husband's recovery, but the dog did so much more.
Hello, little boy. Look.
With Teddy's help, Andy came out of his coma 3 days early. The 4-year-old dog was honored with this year's Animal Award at the RSPCA Honors in the UK. Andy says the pup stole his heart when they first met. Now it's helping Andy live.